The grand arena of the Crimson Moon Pack buzzed with anticipation as hundreds gathered for the event that would change everything. Kael stood in the shadows beneath the stone archways, his thin frame pressed against the cold wall, trying to make himself invisible. It was a skill he'd perfected over his 23 years of existence. "Move aside, worthless," a gruff voice commanded. Kael stumbled backward as Beta Marcus shoved past him, nearly knocking him to the ground. The Beta didn't even glance back. To him, Kael was less than air. He was nothing. Kael steadied himself and pulled his worn gray cloak tighter around his shoulders. Gray. The color of the rejected, the packless, the omega without worth. In a world where alphas wore crimson and gold, where betas dressed in proud blues and silvers, Kael's gray marked him as the lowest of the low. "Did you hear?" a she-wolf whispered nearby, not bothering to lower her voice though Kael stood mere feet away. "Alpha King Dominic is offering his daughter's hand to whoever can ride Tempest." "The black stallion? The one that killed 2 alphas last month?" her companion gasped. "The very same. They say the horse is cursed, or blessed. Wild magic runs through its veins. Nobody can get within 10 feet without being trampled." Kael's fingers traced the old scar on his left palm, a habit when he was nervous. He'd heard the stories about Tempest. The massive destrier had appeared at the kingdom's borders 3 months ago, a creature of legend with a coat like midnight and eyes that burned with an otherworldly silver fire. Some said it was a gift from the moon goddess herself. Others claimed it was a demon in equine form. Alpha King Dominic had declared that any unmated wolf who could ride Tempest would win not only his daughter Princess Sera's hand, but also the title of Crown Prince and command of the kingdom's armies. It was an opportunity that had drawn every ambitious alpha from 1,000 miles in all directions. The crowd began to move toward the arena proper, and Kael was swept along like driftwood in a current. He didn't want to be here, but as Omega to the Crimson Moon Pack, even a rejected one, he was required to attend all major pack gatherings. His absence would be noted and punished. The arena was a massive oval of packed earth surrounded by rising stone seats. At the center stood a reinforced pen constructed from timber as thick as a man's torso, bound with iron chains blessed by the pack's priestess. Even from a distance, Kael could feel the power radiating from within that pen. Then he saw it. Tempest was enormous, 18 hands at least, with a muscular frame that spoke of both speed and devastating power. Its coat absorbed the light, making it seem like a moving shadow. But it was the eyes that captured Kael completely. Those silver eyes held intelligence, fury, and something else. Something that made Kael's heart ache with a longing he couldn't name. The horse paced the perimeter of its prison, head high, nostrils flaring. Every movement was grace and barely contained violence. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Kael startled. He hadn't noticed the old woman who'd appeared beside him. She was tiny, hunched with age, her face a map of wrinkles. But her eyes were sharp and knowing. Yes," Kael admitted quietly. "You feel it, don't you, child? The call." Before Kael could ask what she meant, a trumpet blared. Alpha King Dominic rose from his throne in the royal box, his presence commanding immediate silence. He was a mountain of a man, his alpha aura so powerful it made the air shimmer. "Warriors of the realm," his voice boomed across the arena. "Today, one of you will prove yourself worthy of my daughter, my kingdom, and this magnificent beast. The rules are simple. Stay mounted on Tempest for 1 minute. Just 60 seconds, and glory is yours. Princess Sera sat beside her father, beautiful and cold as carved ice. She looked thoroughly disinterested in the proceedings, her gaze distant. Kael felt a pang of sympathy for her. She was a prize to be won, with no say in her own fate. Let the trials begin. The first challenger was Alpha Theron of the Mountain Ridge Pack, a warrior whose reputation preceded him. He'd won 3 consecutive tournament championships and bore scars from countless battles. His confidence radiated as he approached the pen, stripped to the waist to display muscles that rippled beneath tan skin. The crowd roared their approval. This was what they'd come to see: alpha dominance, strength conquering the untamable. As the gate opened, Theron strode forward, his movements purposeful and controlled. He reached for Tempest's mane, alpha command in his voice. "Submit, beast. I am your master now." What happened next would be seared into Kael's memory forever. Tempest's head whipped around with serpentine speed. Those silver eyes locked onto Theron, and the horse's lips pulled back to reveal teeth that seemed far too sharp. A sound emerged from the stallion's throat, not a whinny, but something closer to a growl. Theron's confidence faltered. His hand hesitated inches from Tempest's neck. That hesitation was fatal. Tempest reared, front hooves slashing the air. Theron tried to dodge, but he wasn't fast enough. A hoof caught him in the chest with a sickening crack, sending the alpha flying backward. He hit the arena wall 20 feet away and slumped to the ground, unconscious. The crowd's cheers died into shocked silence. Healers rushed forward to drag Theron's broken body from the arena. The alpha would survive, but his pride and 3 ribs would take months to mend. Kael's hands trembled. The violence had been swift and brutal, but what disturbed him more was the look in Tempest's eyes. Not mindless rage, but calculated judgment. The horse had found Theron wanting and delivered sentence. Next, Alpha King Dominic called, seemingly unfazed by the carnage. One by one they came. Alpha Garrett, who tried to use a blessed rope to bind Tempest. The horse snapped the rope like thread and chased him from the pen in terror. Alpha Lissa, who attempted to use her gift of animal empathy. She collapsed screaming, clutching her head, overwhelmed by whatever consciousness she'd touched within that magnificent beast. Alpha after alpha fell. Some were trampled. Others fled. A few were carried out on stretchers. Kael watched it all with growing horror and fascination. Tempest wasn't just refusing riders. The horse was testing them. Each challenger approached with arrogance, with the assumption of dominance, with the belief that their alpha strength entitled them to mastery. And each was found utterly lacking. Your turn, Omega scum. Kael's blood turned to ice. He turned to find Darius, the Crimson Moon Pack's head alpha, sneering down at him. Darius was everything Kael wasn't. Tall, muscular, handsome, powerful. He was also the primary architect of Kael's misery. "What?" Kael whispered. "You heard me. The king decreed that any unmated wolf could compete. That includes you, doesn't it?" Darius's smile was cruel. "Unless you're refusing an Alpha King's decree?" The crowd had overheard. Faces turned toward Kael, expressions ranging from amusement to disgust. To refuse would be an insult to the king himself. But to accept... I'm not a warrior. I can't. Scared, little Omega? Darius grabbed Kael's arm, his grip bruising. Of course you are. You're nothing but a coward. But I'm giving you a choice. Go into that arena and face the horse, or I'll make sure you're banished from the pack tonight. You'll be a rogue, Omega. Alone. Do you know what rogues do to Omegas they find without protection? Kael did know. The stories were nightmare fuel. This is cruel even for you, Darius. A voice cut in. Mira, one of the few wolves who'd ever shown Kael kindness, pushed through the crowd. He'll be killed. Then he'll die knowing his place, Darius shrugged. So what'll it be, Kael? The arena or exile? The old woman from before appeared again, her hand touching Kael's shoulder. Her voice was so soft only he could hear. Trust yourself, child. Trust what calls to you. Kael looked toward the pen. Tempest stood in the center now, perfectly still, those silver eyes somehow fixed directly on him despite the distance and the crowd. Time seemed to stop. In that moment, Kael felt it, a pull, deep in his chest, like a string connecting his heart to that magnificent creature. It wasn't fear he felt. It was recognition. I'll do it, Kael heard himself say. The crowd erupted in laughter. Darius's grin widened. Excellent. This should be entertaining. The walk from the stands to the arena floor felt like miles. Every step Kael took was accompanied by jeers and mocking laughter. Look at him shaking. 20 coins says he doesn't even make it through the gate. The Omega's going to soil himself. Kael kept his eyes down, focused on putting one foot in front of the other. His heart hammered against his ribs, and his palms were slick with sweat. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to beg for mercy, to do anything but continue forward. But exile meant death. At least in the arena, it would be quick. A guard opened the gate to the pen, his expression pitying. Moon goddess watch over you, boy, he murmured. Kael stepped through. The gate clanged shut behind him with the finality of a tomb ceiling. He was alone now, alone with the creature that had broken or terrified every alpha who dared approach. Tempest stood 30 feet away, utterly motionless. Those silver eyes tracked Kael's every movement. The horse was even more imposing up close, radiating a power that made the air feel heavy. Kael took a trembling breath and forced himself to take a step forward. Then another. His legs felt like water. Please, he whispered, not even sure what he was asking for. Mercy. A quick death. Understanding. Tempest's ears flicked forward. Kael froze. In all the previous attempts, the horse had attacked within seconds. But now Tempest simply watched him with an intensity that felt like being seen, truly seen, for the first time in his life. I know you don't want this, Kael continued, his voice soft. He wasn't sure why he was speaking, only that it felt right. I don't either. I'm sorry they've caged you. I'm sorry they're trying to break you, to own you. I understand what that feels like. The crowd had gone silent, straining to hear. Even Alpha King Dominic leaned forward in his throne. Kael took another step. Then another. His fear began to ebb, replaced by something else. That pull in his chest grew stronger, more insistent. My name is Kael, he said. I'm nobody important. I'm the pack's shame, the Omega they all wish would just disappear. But I see you. Not as a prize or a weapon or a symbol. I see you. He was close now, close enough to smell the stallion's scent, earth and storm and something wild and clean. Close enough to see his own reflection in those silver eyes. Kael raised his hand, slowly, giving Tempest every opportunity to strike him down. His fingers trembled as they extended toward that midnight coat. The crowd held its collective breath. Tempest's head lowered. Those massive jaws could crush Kael's skull with ease. The horse leaned forward, closing the distance between them until its muzzle was inches from Kael's outstretched palm. Kael felt hot breath against his skin. His hand made contact with Tempest's nose, and the world exploded. Power surged through Kael like lightning through water. His vision whited out, and suddenly he wasn't in the arena anymore. He was flying through a vast consciousness that was both foreign and intimately familiar. Images flooded him. A foal born under a blood moon, silver light pouring from the sky into its newborn eyes. A herd of wild horses running through valleys that existed between worlds, where magic still flowed pure and untainted. Capture by cruel hands, chains that burned, imprisonment in a cage of iron and spite. Alphas approaching with greed in their eyes, seeing only possession, only power to be stolen. And then, a flicker of gray in the corner of a pen. A broken thing that understood what it meant to be caged. Kael gasped as the visions released him. He was back in the arena, his hand still touching Tempest's muzzle, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry for what they've done to you." Tempest made a sound, low and rumbling, almost like a purr. The horse's head pressed more firmly against Kael's palm, and he felt it then. A bond forming between them. Not ownership. Not submission. Something far more profound. Partnership. Recognition. Choice. The horse was choosing him. With movements that felt guided by instinct older than memory, Kael moved to Tempest's side. He grasped the thick mane, no saddle, no bridle, just trust, and pulled himself up. His slight frame made the climb easier than it would have been for the massive alphas. He settled onto Tempest's back, and it felt like coming home. The crowd erupted. Shouts of disbelief, gasps of shock, and one voice that cut through it all. Darius, screaming in incoherent rage. Alpha King Dominic stood, his face unreadable. Kael barely noticed. Beneath him, Tempest began to move. Not the violent bucking that had thrown others, but a gentle walk that became a trot that became a canter. They circled the arena, moving as one being, Kael's body instinctively finding the rhythm of the stallion's gait. 60 seconds passed. Then 90. Then 2 minutes. Tempest could have run forever, and Kael would have stayed mounted through sheer will and wonder alone. But the horse knew. With the wisdom of its ancient bloodline, Tempest understood that they'd proven their point. The stallion came to a stop in the center of the arena, right before the Alpha King's box. Kael slid from Tempest's back, his legs shaky but his heart singing. He'd done it. Against all odds, against all logic, he'd not only survived, he'd succeeded where every powerful alpha had failed. Impossible, Darius snarled from the stands. He cheated. He must have used magic, or drugs, or... Silence. Alpha King Dominic's voice cracked like a whip. He descended from his box with swift, purposeful strides, entering the arena through a private gate. Kael immediately dropped to one knee, eyes lowered. This close, the king's alpha presence was overwhelming, pressing down on him like a physical weight. Look at me, Omega. Kael forced himself to raise his eyes. The Alpha King's face was stern, his dark eyes analytical as they studied Kael with an intensity that made him want to squirm. What is your name? Kael. Your Majesty. Omega of the Crimson Moon Pack. Crimson Moon. The king's gaze shifted to where Darius stood in the crowd. Is this true? This wolf belongs to your pack. Darius looked like he'd swallowed poison. Yes, your majesty. But he's rejected. Worthless. There must be some mist. I asked you a question, not for your opinion on his worth. The king's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. You deemed him worthy enough to be part of your pack, did you not? Yes, your majesty, but then he is a wolf of the realm, with all the rights that entails, including the right to compete in this trial. The king returned his attention to Kael. Stand, Kael. You kneel before no one today. You have accomplished what 100 alphas could not. Shakily, Kael rose to his feet. Behind him, he felt Tempest's presence, solid and reassuring. The horse had moved to stand at his back, a silent guardian. The question now, Alpha King Dominic continued, his voice carrying across the silent arena, is what to do with you. The silence in the arena was absolute. Thousands of wolves held their breath, waiting for the Alpha King's judgment. Kael felt the weight of every eye upon him, but none more heavily than Princess Sera's. For the first time since the trials began, she was looking directly at him, her ice blue eyes wide with something that might have been shock or horror. He couldn't tell which. By the laws of this trial, the king said slowly, each word deliberate, you have won, Kael of the Crimson Moon Pack. The question is, what have you won? Darius pushed forward through the crowd, his face purple with rage. Your Majesty, you cannot possibly consider. He's an Omega. The law clearly states that only alphas can hold positions of royal authority. To make him crown prince would be. I know what the law states, Alpha Darius. The king's tone could have frozen fire. I wrote most of them. But I also decreed that any unmated wolf could compete. I set no restrictions on rank or designation. The moon goddess herself has spoken through this trial. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Invoking the moon goddess was not done lightly. Elder Oren, the kingdom's high priest, descended from his seat among the royal advisors. He was ancient, his fur more silver than gray, but he moved with the dignity of his position. He approached Tempest carefully, his eyes not on the horse but on the space around it. Your Majesty, Oren said, his voice reedy but clear. I must examine something. May I? At the king's nod, the elder raised his hands, speaking words in the old tongue that made Kael's ears ring. A soft golden light emanated from the priest's palms, washing over both Kael and Tempest. The horse didn't react with violence as it had to every other approach. Instead, Tempest simply stood still, allowing the examination. Elder Oren's eyes widened. He stumbled backward, catching himself with his staff. Blessed moon goddess, he breathed. It's true. The old prophecies. Speak plainly, Oren, the king commanded. The elder's hands trembled as he pointed at the space between Kael and Tempest. They're bonded, your majesty. Truly bonded. I can see the connection, threads of silver light, ancient magic that hasn't been witnessed in 300 years. This isn't a matter of skill or luck. The bond between wolf and steed, it's sacred. It cannot be undone, and it was not created by either of them. It was always meant to be. The crowd exploded into chaos. Shouts, arguments, and exclamations of disbelief crashed over Kael like waves. He swayed on his feet, overwhelmed by the noise and the implications of what the elder had just revealed. Tempest shifted, placing his massive body between Kael and the crowd, a living shield. Silence. The Alpha King's command was accompanied by a pulse of power so intense that several younger wolves in the crowd dropped to their knees. Elder Oren, are you absolutely certain of this? As certain as I am of the moon's rising, Your Majesty. The bond. It's beautiful. Pure. I've only read about such things in the oldest texts. When a steed of the old bloodlines, those born of magic and moonlight, chooses their rider, it's for life. They become two halves of a greater whole. Princess Sera stood abruptly, her chair scraping against stone. All eyes turned to her. She was pale, her composure cracking for the first time. Father. Her voice was tight, controlled, but Kael could hear the distress beneath it. Please. You cannot expect me to bond with an Omega. I am a princess of the realm. My mate should be strong, worthy of. Worthy. The king's voice was soft now, which somehow made it more dangerous. Your mate should be chosen by the moon goddess herself, daughter. Or do you question her wisdom? Sera's mouth opened and closed. To question the goddess was heresy. No, father, but this Omega, the king gestured to Kael, has done what none of our mightiest alphas could accomplish. He has been chosen by a creature of legend, marked by sacred magic. If that doesn't speak to the goddess's will, then I don't know what does. But Kael could see the conflict in the king's eyes. This wasn't what he'd planned. He'd expected a strong alpha, a warrior who could lead armies and defend the kingdom. Not a thin, scarred Omega who looked like a strong wind might blow him over. Kael's throat was tight, but he forced himself to speak. Your Majesty, I don't want to cause problems. I never asked for this. If there's a way to release me from... There is no release, Elder Oren interrupted gently. That's what you must understand, young one. The bond is beyond any of our control now. To separate you from Tempest would be to rip apart something sacred. It would likely kill you both. The world tilted around Kael. Kill them both. The magnificent creature behind him, the being he'd felt such instant connection with, they were tied together now, for better or worse. I need time to consider this, the Alpha King said finally. This trial has revealed complications I did not anticipate. Kael, you will be given quarters in the palace as befits a potential crown prince. The title seemed to pain him. No one is to harm or harass him. He is under my protection until I make my final decision. Is that clear? The crowd murmured their acknowledgement, though Kael could feel the hostility radiating from many of them, Darius especially. Your Majesty, a smooth voice called out. Lord Castor, the king's chief military advisor, stepped forward. He was a silver-furred alpha with cold, calculating eyes. Perhaps there is a middle solution. The Omega has proven worthy of the horse, yes. But worthiness for a beast and worthiness for a princess are different matters. Perhaps a test. The king's eyes narrowed. What kind of test? The kingdom faces threats, as you well know. Rogue attacks on the eastern borders have increased. Villages are being raided. We need someone who can not only ride Tempest but can use that partnership to protect the realm. Castor's smile was sharp. Give the Omega, let's say 3 months. Let him train, let him prove he can be more than just someone the horse tolerates. If he can successfully defend one of the border villages from a rogue attack, then perhaps he truly is worthy of the crown. It was a trap, Kael realized with growing horror. He'd never held a sword in his life. He'd never been in a real fight. He was an Omega who'd spent his life being beaten down, told he was worthless, kept from any kind of combat training. 3 months wasn't enough time to transform into a warrior. But he could see the calculation in the king's eyes. This was a way out, a compromise that would satisfy the letter of his decree while likely ending with Kael's failure, or death. An interesting proposal, the king said slowly. Kael, what say you? Are you willing to accept such a test? Every fiber of Kael's being wanted to refuse, to run, to find any escape from this nightmare. But then he felt it, a warm presence in his mind, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Tempest, somehow communicating without words, sending feelings of strength, of belief, of partnership. You are not alone, the sensation seemed to say. We are stronger together. Kael took a shaky breath and straightened his spine. I accept, Your Majesty. A mix of surprise and respect flickered across the king's face. Very well. You will have 3 months. Master Garrett will oversee your training. I volunteer to oversee his training myself, Your Majesty. A new voice rang out. A woman pushed through the crowd, and Kael recognized her immediately. Captain Lyria, commander of the king's elite guard, a legend in her own right. She was a beta, scarred and battle-hardened, with eyes that missed nothing. Lyria, the king sounded genuinely surprised. You would take this on? I would. If the goddess has chosen this wolf, then I would see him given a real chance, not set up to fail. She shot a pointed look at Lord Castor. I saw what happened in that arena, Your Majesty. I saw courage when every instinct must have been screaming at him to run. Courage can be built upon. Give me 3 months with him, and I'll make sure he's ready. The king studied her for a long moment, then nodded. So be it. Captain Lyria will train Kael. In 3 months' time, he will face the test. He raised his voice to address the crowd. This trial is concluded. Dismissed. As the crowd began to disperse, Kael felt his legs finally give out. He would have collapsed if Tempest hadn't been there, the horse's solid presence holding him up. Strong hands gripped his shoulders. Captain Lyria, her expression stern but not unkind. Come on, Omega. Let's get you somewhere quiet before you pass out. We have a lot of work ahead of us. As she led him toward the palace, Kael caught one last glimpse of Princess Sera. She was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Was it curiosity? Resentment? Fear? Whatever it was, Kael had a feeling his troubles were only just beginning. The palace was a labyrinth of marble corridors and soaring arches, more beautiful and intimidating than anything Kael had ever seen. The Crimson Moon Pack's compound had been modest, built for function rather than splendor. This was something else entirely, a monument to power and legacy. Captain Lyria led him through hallways where portraits of past kings and queens stared down with judgmental eyes. Servants pressed themselves against walls as they passed, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed disgust when they caught the scent of Omega. Don't let them get to you, Lyria said without looking back. Half of them are cowards who wouldn't last 5 minutes in a real fight. They're only brave when they're looking down on someone. They climbed a spiraling staircase to the 3rd floor of the East Wing. Lyria stopped before an ornate door carved with wolves running beneath a full moon. These will be your quarters. They're not the royal suites, but they're respectable. Better than whatever hovel you're used to, I'd wager." She wasn't wrong. The room beyond was larger than the entire space Kael had occupied in the Crimson Moon Pack. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, covered in rich blue linens. A fireplace crackled with fresh flames. Windows overlooked the palace gardens, where the last light of sunset painted everything gold. "The servants will bring you dinner soon. Try to eat, you're too thin, and will need to build your strength." Lyria moved to the window, her expression contemplative. "I know you're overwhelmed. I know you're terrified. But I meant what I said out there. I saw courage in you today." "I was terrified," Kael admitted quietly. "I'm still terrified. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it." She turned to face him. "I'm going to be honest with you, Kael. The odds aren't in your favor. Lord Castor suggested that test specifically because he expects you to fail. He wants you to fail. A lot of powerful wolves in this kingdom want you to fail." "Why are you helping me then?" Lyria was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled up her sleeve, revealing a mark on her inner forearm, a crescent moon surrounded by thorns. "I'm a beta," she said. "Not an omega, but not an alpha either. When I joined the military 20 years ago, they tried to keep me in supply management, far from any real combat. They said betas were good for support roles, not leadership, not fighting." She lowered her sleeve. "I had to fight 3 times as hard as any alpha to prove myself. I had to be perfect when they were allowed to be merely good. And even now, as captain of the King's Guard, there are still those who whisper that I only have my position because the king wanted to appear progressive." Kael understood. Different circumstances, but the same underlying poison, the belief that some wolves were simply worth less than others. "I'm helping you because I believe the goddess doesn't make mistakes," Lyria continued. "And because I'm tired of watching potential be crushed under the weight of prejudice. You did something impossible today, Kael. Now we need to make sure you survive long enough to do it again." A knock at the door interrupted them. A young servant girl entered with a tray of food, her eyes downcast. She set it on the table and scurried out without a word, but not before Kael caught her expression. Pity mixed with fear, as if his bad fortune might be contagious. "Eat and rest tonight," Lyria said, moving toward the door. "Tomorrow, your training begins at dawn. Meet me in the eastern courtyard. Don't be late." After she left, Kael stood alone in the too large room, feeling like an imposter in someone else's life. He moved to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. A movement in the gardens below caught his eye. Princess Sera walked among the roses, her silver gown flowing behind her like moonlight. Even from a distance, Kael could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she moved as if carrying an invisible burden. He felt a pang of sympathy. She was as trapped as he was, a pawn in her father's games, promised to whoever completed an arbitrary task. At least Kael had spent his life with low expectations. Sera had been raised for greatness, only to have her future tied to someone she clearly considered beneath her. The food on the tray was still warm, roasted meat, fresh bread, vegetables in a rich sauce. It was more food than Kael usually saw in a week. His stomach growled, but anxiety had stolen his appetite. Still, Lyria was right. He needed to eat. He was halfway through the meal when another knock came at the door. This time he called for entry, expecting perhaps another servant. Instead, a young man swept in, an alpha by his scent, perhaps a year or two younger than Kael. He was dressed in fine clothes, his dark hair artfully styled, his handsome face arranged in an expression of friendly curiosity. "So you're the miracle Omega everyone's talking about," he said with a grin. "I had to see for myself. I'm Adrian, Princess Sera's younger brother. The spare heir, as they so charmingly call me." "Your Highness," Kael started to bow, but Adrian waved him off. "None of that. If you're going to potentially become my brother-in-law, we might as well skip the formalities." He threw himself into a chair with casual grace, studying Kael with bright, intelligent eyes. "You've caused quite the uproar, you know. The palace is in chaos. Half the nobles are demanding you be executed for impudence. The other half are making bets on how quickly you'll fail the test." "Which half are you in?" Kael asked, surprised by his own boldness. Adrian laughed, a genuine sound. "Neither. I'm in the 'this is the most interesting thing to happen in years' camp.' My sister has been courted by boring alpha after boring alpha, all of them more interested in power than in her. At least you're different." "I don't want to marry your sister," Kael said quietly. "I don't want any of this." "No." Adrian leaned forward. "Then what do you want?" It was a simple question, but it struck Kael like a blow. What did he want? He'd spent so long just trying to survive, to get through each day without being beaten or starved, that he'd never really considered what he might want if given the choice. "I want..." Kael struggled for words. "I want to matter. I want people to see me as something other than worthless. I want..." He thought of Tempest, of that moment of connection in the arena. "I want to be free." Adrian's expression grew thoughtful. "Free. That's interesting. Most people in your position would say they want power, or wealth, or revenge." "I'm not most people." "No," Adrian agreed. "You're really not. My sister is terrified of you, you know." "Of me?" Kael couldn't hide his disbelief. "I'm an Omega. She's a princess. What could I possibly..." "You represent change. Uncertainty. Everything she's built her identity around. Her status, her carefully maintained image, her expectations for her life. You've shattered it all in 60 seconds. Adrian stood, moving to look out the window. Sera isn't cruel, despite how she may have seemed today. She's just rigid. She needs control, predictability. You're chaos personified to her. How do I? Kael hesitated. How do I get her to not hate me? That, my friend, is going to be your second greatest challenge. The first is surviving. Adrian turned back with a serious expression. Be careful, Kael. There are wolves in this palace who smile while sharpening their knives. Lord Castor, for one. He has his own candidate for Sera's hand, his son, Marcus, who was too cowardly to even enter the trial. If you fail or die, Marcus becomes the default choice. Are you saying he'll try to kill me? I'm saying watch your back. Don't eat or drink anything that hasn't been tested. Don't go anywhere alone if you can help it. And trust very, very few people. Adrian moved to the door. I'm telling you this because I like you. You're genuine. That's rare in this place. Why trust me? Kael asked. You just met me. Adrian's smile was sad. Because I know what it's like to be underestimated. To be seen as less than because of circumstances beyond your control. I'm a second son, Kael. In this kingdom, that makes me almost as invisible as an omega. After Adrian left, Kael sat in the gathering darkness of his room, his mind racing. The food sat heavy in his stomach, and paranoia whispered that perhaps it had been poisoned after all. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every creak of the old palace a harbinger of danger. He moved to the window again, looking out toward where he knew the stables must be. Tempest was there, alone in whatever prison they'd moved him to. The thought made Kael's chest ache. They were bonded now, Elder Oren had said. But what did that mean? Could Tempest feel Kael's fear right now? His loneliness? As if in answer, a warm presence bloomed in his mind, that same sunlight through cloud sensation he'd felt in the arena. It came with feelings, reassurance, strength, patience. And beneath it all, a fierce protectiveness. We are together, the sensation seemed to say. Even apart, we are together. Kael closed his eyes, letting the comfort of that connection wash over him. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever trials awaited, he wasn't facing them alone. He had Tempest. He had Captain Lyria. He even had, surprisingly, Prince Adrian. It wasn't much. But it was more than he'd had yesterday. Dawn came too quickly. Kael woke to pounding on his door and a servant's voice calling that Captain Lyria was waiting. He dressed in the simple training clothes that had been left for him, sturdy wool pants and a tunic that actually fit properly, a luxury he'd never experienced. The eastern courtyard was a wide expanse of packed earth surrounded by high walls. Weapon racks lined one side, and training dummies stood at attention like silent sentinels. Captain Lyria was already there, along with someone Kael hadn't expected. Mira, the she-wolf from the Crimson Moon Pack who tried to defend him against Darius. Mira. Kael couldn't hide his surprise. She grinned at him, though he could see the nervousness beneath it. Heard you could use a friendly face. Captain Lyria asked me to come help with your training. I'm a decent tracker and hunter. Figured I might teach you a few things. How did you even? The captain has her ways, Mira said mysteriously. Lyria strode forward. All business. Enough chatter. Kael, we have 3 months to turn you into someone who can survive a rogue attack. That's not a lot of time. Most warriors train for years. We don't have years. So we're going to do this the hard way. She tossed him a wooden practice sword. Kael caught it awkwardly, nearly dropping it. Have you ever held a weapon before? No, Captain. Good. That means you have no bad habits to break. Show me your stance. Kael tried to mimic what he'd seen warriors do, feet apart, sword held in front. Lyria circled him like a predator, her expression growing more pained with each step. No. No, that's all wrong. You're standing like you're waiting to be hit, not preparing to fight. Again. She corrected his posture, adjusting his grip, repositioning his feet. Then she picked up her own practice sword. Now try to block me. She moved with blinding speed. The practice sword cracked against Kael's ribs before he even saw it coming. Pain exploded across his side, and he stumbled backward, gasping. What are you doing? Mira protested. You could have broken his ribs. And a rogue will do much worse. Again, Kael. They went again. And again. And again. Each time, Lyria's sword found its mark. His shoulder, his thigh, his other side. Each strike was controlled, not hard enough to seriously injure but more than enough to hurt. By the 10th attempt, Kael was on his knees, breathing hard, his body a map of bruises. "Get up," Lyria commanded. "I can't. Get up." There was steel in her voice, but also something else. Expectation. Belief, even. She thought he could do this. Kael forced himself to his feet, his legs shaking. "Better. Now watch." She demonstrated a basic blocking motion, slow and deliberate. "You're not trying to stop my sword with strength. You'll lose that battle every time. You're redirecting it. Using my momentum against me. Try." She struck again, and this time, Kael managed to get his sword in the way. The impact jarred his arms, and her blade still slipped past to tap his shoulder, but it was progress. Again. They trained until the sun was high overhead, and Kael's arms felt like they were made of lead. When Lyria finally called a halt, Kael collapsed onto the ground, his body screaming in protest. "Pathetic," a voice sneered. Kael looked up to find a group of young alpha warriors had gathered to watch, led by a man who must be Marcus, Lord Castor's son. He had his father's cold eyes and a cruel twist to his mouth. "This is who might become crown prince," Marcus continued. "This weakling can barely hold a sword. The rogues will tear him apart." "Then why don't you show us how it's done?" Lyria said coolly. "Since you were too scared to enter the trial yourself." Marcus's face flushed. "I wasn't scared. It was beneath me to." Convenient excuse. "Now either put up or shut up. I don't have time for spectators." The other alphas laughed, and Marcus's humiliation turned to rage. He grabbed a practice sword and advanced on Kael. "Fine. Let's see what the miracle Omega can do." "Marcus, no." Lyria started forward, but Marcus was already swinging. Kael barely got his sword up in time. The impact drove him backward, his feet scrambling for purchase. Marcus didn't let up, striking again and again with vicious force. "You think you're special?" Marcus snarled between blows. "You think bonding with a horse makes you worthy of my kingdom? You're nothing. You'll always be nothing." Something inside Kael snapped. All the years of abuse, of being told he was worthless, of accepting his place at the bottom, it ignited into a spark of defiance. He caught Marcus's next strike, using the redirecting motion Lyria had shown him. For the first time, he managed to deflect the blade away completely. Marcus stumbled, surprised, and Kael pressed forward. He was clumsy. His form was terrible. But there was fury in his movements now, a desperate determination. He swung, and his wooden blade cracked against Marcus's shoulder. The alpha's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in rage. "You dare!" Marcus's next strike wasn't controlled. It was meant to hurt. The practice sword slammed into Kael's head with enough force to send him sprawling. Stars exploded across his vision, and he tasted blood. Enough. Lyria was there, her own sword at Marcus's throat. "You will stand down, or I will report your conduct to the king himself. He hit me first. After you attacked him while he was exhausted from training. I witnessed everything, Marcus. As did your friends." Lyria's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "Touch him again, and I'll make sure your father knows exactly how cowardly his son really is." Marcus backed away, his face twisted with humiliation. This isn't over, Omega, he spat at Kael. Then he and his cronies stalked away. Mira helped Kael sit up, her hands gentle as she checked the wound on his head. You're bleeding. We need to get you to the healers. No, Kael said, even though the world was spinning. No, I need to finish training. You need medical attention, Lyria said, but there was approval in her voice. But we can compromise. Mira, take him to see Healer Iris. She's discreet and kind. Kael, you rest for the remainder of the day. Tomorrow, we train again. And what you showed at the end there, that defiance, remember that feeling. Anger can be a weapon if you control it instead of letting it control you. As Mira helped him toward the palace infirmary, Kael caught sight of someone watching from a high window. Princess Sera stood there, her expression unreadable, before she turned away and disappeared into shadow. Healer Iris's chambers were filled with the scent of herbs and gentle magic. She was an elderly Omega, one of the few Kael had encountered in the palace, with kind eyes and hands that glowed with soft silver light as she worked. You'll have a nasty bruise, but no concussion, fortunately, she said as she finished her examination. That Marcus is a bully, like his father. You're not the first person he's hurt during training. Why doesn't anyone stop him? Kael asked. Because his father has power, and power protects its own. Iris handed him a small vial. Drink this before bed. It'll help with the pain and the swelling. Thank you, Kael said, then hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course, dear. How did you become a healer? I thought Omegas weren't allowed to train for positions like that. Iris smiled sadly. They're not, usually. But I had a gift that couldn't be ignored. Healing magic that manifested when I was very young. The king at the time, Dominic's father, was more open-minded than most. He gave me a chance. Of course, I had to be 3 times as skilled as any beta or alpha healer to be taken seriously. I had to prove myself every single day. Does it get easier? No, Iris said honestly. But you get stronger. You learn to care less about the opinions of those who'll never see your worth. You find your own value, independent of their validation. After leaving the infirmary, Mira insisted on escorting Kael back to his quarters. As they walked, she kept glancing at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He finally asked. You hit him, she said. Marcus. You actually landed a blow on him. It was luck. It wasn't. I saw your face. You were focused. Determined. Kael, do you realize what you did today? After just one morning of training, you held your own against an alpha who's been training his whole life. I got my head bashed in. After you hit him first. That's progress. Mira grabbed his arm, stopping him in the corridor. Listen to me. I've known you for 3 years at the Crimson Moon Pack. I've watched Darius and the others beat you down, over and over. I've watched you take it, day after day, and I've hated myself for not being brave enough to do more than offer kind words. But today, I saw something different. I saw fire. Kael didn't know what to say. He felt the bruises forming on his body, the ache in his muscles. He didn't feel like fire. He felt like he'd been trampled. I should rest, he said quietly. Myra's expression fell, but she nodded. Of course. I'll check on you tomorrow. Alone in his quarters, Kael moved to the window and stared out at the palace grounds. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, beyond the palace walls, was the world he was supposed to save. Villages under attack. Innocents depending on someone who barely knew which end of a sword to hold. The task seemed impossible. "You're not alone," that warm presence reminded him, blooming in his mind like a flower opening to sunlight. Tempest. An idea formed. Kael waited until full darkness fell, then slipped out of his room. The palace was quieter at night. Most servants retired to their quarters, guards at their posts but not actively patrolling the inner halls. He made his way down, using his omega senses to avoid detection. It was a skill he'd honed over years of trying to make himself invisible. Now, he used it to navigate the palace until he reached the royal stables. They were magnificent, far grander than any stable Kael had ever seen. But he wasn't interested in the regular horses. He followed the bond in his chest, that silver thread connecting him to Tempest, until he found where they'd isolated the great stallion. A separate building behind the main stables, reinforced and heavily locked. But the locks were on the outside, meant to keep Tempest in, not to keep anyone out. Kael slipped inside. Tempest occupied a large stall, far more spacious than the pen in the arena but still a cage. The horses' silver eyes caught the moonlight streaming through high windows, and Kael felt the surge of recognition and joy through their bond. "Hey," Kael whispered, approaching slowly. "I'm sorry they have you locked up like this." Tempest's head lowered, and Kael pressed his forehead against the stallion's muzzle. The physical contact strengthened their mental connection, and suddenly he could sense more, Tempest's emotions, complex and profound. The horse was proud, wild, but also lonely. And beneath it all was the same thing Kael felt, the desire to be free, to be more than what others decided they should be. "I'm scared," Kael admitted, speaking truths he couldn't tell anyone else. "I don't know if I can do this. Everyone expects me to fail. Part of me wants to fail, just to get this over with. To go back to being invisible, even if it means being nothing." Tempest made a soft sound, and feelings flooded through their bond. Courage, strength, partnership, choice. "You chose me," Kael said wonderingly. "Out of everyone, you chose me. Why?" Images flashed through his mind. Not words, but understanding. Tempest had seen something in Kael that day in the arena. Not weakness, but potential. Not submission, but empathy. Kael had approached without trying to dominate, without assuming ownership. He'd seen Tempest as an equal, not a tool or a prize. And more than that, Tempest had been waiting. The horse's kind, born of ancient magic, didn't bond randomly. They chose riders whose souls matched their own, whose destinies were intertwined. Tempest had waited centuries for Kael, across lifetimes and rebirth, knowing their paths would eventually cross. Tears streamed down Kael's face. "I won't let you down," he whispered. "I promise. Whatever it takes, I'll become worthy of you." The stable door creaked open. Kael spun, his heart hammering, expecting guards. Instead, Princess Sera stood in the doorway, wrapped in a dark cloak. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Then Sera stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "If the guards find you." "I needed to see him," Kael said. "We're bonded. Being apart, it hurts." Sera moved closer, her eyes on Tempest rather than Kael. I used to come to the stables when I was young, she said, her voice soft with memory. I'd pretend I was just another horse handler, not a princess. For a few hours, I could be free of expectations, of duty. I'm sorry, Kael said. I know this isn't what you wanted. What I wanted. Sera laughed, but it was bitter. Do you know what I wanted, Kael? I wanted to choose my own mate. I wanted to fall in love like the girls in stories, not be offered as a prize in my father's games. But we don't always get what we want, do we? No, Kael agreed. We don't. Sera finally looked at him, really looked at him, and Kael saw the exhaustion behind her icy composure. She was terrified too, he realized. Trapped in a different cage, but a cage nonetheless. I don't hate you, she said. I want you to know that. I'm angry at the situation, at being powerless. But I don't hate you. I don't want to force you into anything, Kael said. If there was a way to break the bond, to free us both. There isn't. Elder Oren was clear. We're stuck with each other. She reached out slowly, letting Tempest sniff her hand. The horse allowed the touch, surprising them both. He's magnificent. I can see why the goddess chose him for something important. The question is whether she chose me, or just made a mistake, Kael said. Sera studied him, her expression thoughtful. The goddess doesn't make mistakes. My tutors taught me that. Every thread in the tapestry has purpose, even the ones that seem out of place. She withdrew her hand from Tempest. I should go. If anyone finds us together like this, there will be rumors. Princess, Kael called as she reached the door. Thank you. For not hating me. She paused, her hand on the door. Survive the next 3 months, Kael. Prove everyone wrong. Not for me, not for my father, but for yourself. Show them that an Omega can be extraordinary. Then she was gone, leaving Kael alone with Tempest and a strange new feeling in his chest. Not quite hope, but something close. He stayed in the stable for another hour, drawing strength from Tempest's presence, before finally returning to his quarters. As he drifted off to sleep, bruised and exhausted but strangely at peace, he dreamed of running, not away from something but toward it, toward a future where he mattered. 3 months passed like a fever dream. Kael's days blurred together. Dawn training with Captain Lyria until his muscles screamed, afternoons with Mira learning tracking and survival skills, evenings studying strategy and kingdom geography with Prince Adrian. Every spare moment he spent with Tempest, their bond deepening until he could feel the horse's presence like a second heartbeat. His body transformed. The scrawny Omega who'd stumbled into the arena was gone, replaced by lean muscle and confident movement. Scars from training joined the old ones, but these he wore with pride, proof of effort, not abuse. Again. Lyria shouted as their practice swords clashed. This time, Kael didn't just block, he countered, spinning inside her guard to tap his blade against her ribs. She grinned fiercely. Finally. You're thinking like a warrior. But it wasn't just combat training. Adrian taught him politics, how to read people, how to lead. Strength isn't just physical, the prince said. You'll need to inspire others, make them believe in you. The palace slowly shifted around him. Some still sneered, but others watched with grudging respect. Even some of the servants who'd once avoided his eyes now nodded in greeting. Princess Sera remained distant but no longer hostile. Kael would catch her watching his training sessions from palace windows, her expression unreadable. The night before the test, Kael couldn't sleep. He made his way to Tempest's stable, finding Captain Lyria already there. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "Too nervous." "Good. Nerves keep you sharp." She turned to face him. "Kael, I've trained hundreds of warriors in my career. You've learned in 3 months what takes most years. But tomorrow isn't about skill. It's about heart. Can you do what needs to be done?" Kael pressed his hand against Tempest's neck, feeling the steady rhythm of the horse's breathing. "I have to. Too many people are depending on me now." "Wrong answer," Lyria said sharply. "Don't do it for them. Do it because you refuse to be what they said you were. Do it because you're tired of being invisible." Kael met her eyes. "I'm ready." Dawn broke over Millbrook Village, a small settlement on the eastern border. Kael sat astride Tempest, Captain Lyria beside him on her own mount, along with a small contingent of palace guards, witnesses to his test. Lord Castor had chosen this village specifically. Intelligence reports confirmed rogue activity in the area. What Kael didn't know was that Castor had sent word to the rogue pack, ensuring they'd attack today. "Remember the plan," Lyria murmured. "Evacuate the civilians first. Then..." A howl split the air. Then another. Within seconds, 20 rogues burst from the forest. Massive, scarred wolves with madness in their eyes, larger than any normal wolf pack. "That's more than intelligence reported," one guard gasped. Kael's heart hammered, but through the bond, he felt Tempest's calm certainty. They moved as one, charging toward the village as terrified civilians ran from their homes. "Get to the meeting hall," Kael shouted, his voice carrying with unexpected authority. Guards, defensive positions around the civilians. The rogues split into 2 groups, one heading for the fleeing villagers, the other straight for Kael. He drew his sword, the weight familiar now, and guided Tempest with his knees. The first rogue leaped. Tempest reared, hooves striking with bone-crushing force, while Kael's blade found another's throat. The bond between them sang, each anticipating the other's movements perfectly. More rogues came. Kael fought like someone possessed, every lesson, every bruise, every moment of training crystallizing into instinct. He wasn't fighting with alpha strength, but with speed, precision, and the devastating partnership with Tempest. A massive rogue alpha, clearly the pack leader, locked eyes on Kael. This wasn't a mindless beast. Intelligence and cunning showed in his scarred face. He charged, and Kael knew this was the real test. They clashed in the center of the village square. The rogue was stronger, bigger, more experienced. But Kael had something the rogue didn't. He was fighting for something beyond himself. The rogue's claws raked across Kael's side, sending pain blazing through him. But instead of falling, Kael used the momentum, rolling off Tempest's back and under the rogue's guard. His sword found the gap in the rogue's defenses, the vulnerable spot Lyria had taught him to look for. The rogue alpha fell. The remaining rogues, seeing their leader defeated, scattered back into the forest. Victory, but at a cost. Kael slumped against Tempest, blood seeping from his wounds. "Healer," Lyria shouted, but she was smiling through her concern. "You magnificent fool. You actually did it." A week later, Kael stood in the palace's grand hall, his wounds bandaged but healing. The room was packed, nobles, warriors, common folk, all gathered for the Alpha King's proclamation. Lord Castor stood rigid with fury. His plan to ensure Kael's failure backfired spectacularly. Marcus wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Alpha King Dominic rose from his throne, his expression grave. Kael, formerly of the Crimson Moon Pack, stepped forward. Kael moved through the crowd, feeling every eye on him. But this time, he didn't shrink from their gazes. He held his head high. "You were given a task deemed impossible," the king said. "Not only did you complete it, but you saved an entire village and defeated a rogue pack twice the reported size. You've proven yourself worthy not through alpha strength, but through courage, intelligence, and an unbreakable bond with a creature of legend." The king descended the steps, standing before Kael. "I confess, I hoped this trial would produce a different result. I wanted a traditional alpha, someone who fit my expectations. But the moon goddess has shown me that expectations can be prisons. You've broken those chains." He turned to address the crowd. "Therefore I formally recognize Kael as Crown Prince of the realm, betrothed to Princess Sera, and future king of our people." The hall erupted, some in applause, others in outrage. But the king's word was law. Princess Sera rose from her seat, descending to stand beside Kael. Her hand found his, and she squeezed gently. "We'll figure this out," she whispered. "Together." It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was partnership. Understanding. Possibility. 1 year later, Kael stood on the palace balcony overlooking the kingdom, Tempest grazing in the royal gardens below. So much had changed. The laws had begun to shift. Omega rights expanded, opportunities opened. It wasn't perfect, and resistance remained strong in many quarters. But progress had begun. Sera joined him, no longer the Ice Princess but a true partner. They'd built something neither expected, not the passionate romance of stories, but something deeper. Respect. Trust. Friendship that was slowly, carefully, becoming something more. "Adrian's asking if you'll attend the new training academy opening," she said, leaning against the balcony rail. "The one that accepts students regardless of designation." "I'll be there," Kael said. The academy had been his idea, a place where omegas, betas, and alphas trained together as equals. Captain Lyria served as its first director. "Still having nightmares about that day in the arena?" Sera asked gently. "Sometimes. But also dreams." Kael smiled. "About what comes next?" Below, Tempest raised his head, silver eyes gleaming in the sunlight. Through their bond, Kael felt the horse's contentment, its pride, its unwavering belief that they'd chosen correctly. Kael had entered that arena expecting to die. Instead, he'd found purpose. He'd found his voice. He'd found that an Omega could be extraordinary, not despite what he was, but because of it. "Ready for the council meeting?" Sera asked, offering her hand. Kael took it, feeling the weight of the crown that would one day be his, not as a burden, but as responsibility. Ready. Together, the rejected Omega and the reluctant princess walked back inside, toward a future they would build together. Not perfect, but theirs. And in the gardens below, a legendary horse watched over them both, knowing that destiny had unfolded exactly as the moon goddess intended. Wow, what a journey that was! From a rejected Omega cowering in the shadows to a crown prince who changed an entire kingdom. Kael's story reminds us that our circumstances don't define our destiny, our courage does. If this story moved you, if you found yourself rooting for Kael and Tempest, please hit that like button right now. It truly helps this channel grow and lets me know you want more epic stories like this. What did you think? Drop a comment below and tell me. What was your favorite moment? Was it when Kael first touched Tempest, the brutal training montage, or that epic battle against the rogue pack? Should I create a sequel? Would you want to hear about Kael and Sera's reign, or maybe a prequel about Tempest's origins? What other underdog stories would you like to hear? Dragon riders? Forbidden magic? Let me know. And if you're new here, subscribe and ring that notification bell. I create immersive, emotional fantasy stories every week that will transport you to worlds of magic, romance, and triumph. Don't miss the next adventure. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they think, that being different is a superpower, and that the moon goddess doesn't make mistakes. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. You're part of this journey with me, and I appreciate every single one of you. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and remember, you're extraordinary.